To answer firmware engineer interview questions effectively, it's essential to understand the types of questions that may be asked and how to approach them. The interview often begins with a general question, such as explaining firmware to a non-technical person, which allows the interviewer to learn more about the candidate and direct the conversation towards familiar topics. When answering this type of question, it's crucial to use simple, easy-to-understand language and keep the response brief. Firmware can be described as a type of software that provides instructions for electronic devices, such as computers or phones, and is stored in permanent or non-volatile memory. Another typical question is about the programming languages used to write firmware. Contemporary firmware engineers should be familiar with a range of languages, from low-level languages like C or assembly code to higher-level languages like JavaScript, Ruby, or Perl. The key is to research the organization's preferred languages and include them in the answer. For example, a candidate might explain that they started with C or assembly code but now use higher-level languages like JavaScript, C++, Ruby, or Perl, which are more efficient and enable them to create code specific to the device and its functions. Operational questions, which ask about the steps involved in performing a task, are also common. Creating a firmware architecture typically involves several fundamental steps, including identifying requirements, separating firmware architecture from system design, defining time management parameters, testing the firmware, and customizing it for different device types or versions. Firmware engineers are engaged in each phase to ensure the design functions properly. The interviewer may also ask about techniques for reducing power requirements in embedded systems. This can be achieved by putting the system into sleep modes, pausing non-essential functions, or using other methods to minimize power consumption. If unfamiliar with a specific question, it's better to describe the steps that would be taken to resolve the issue, including gathering necessary information. Finally, the interviewer may ask how firmware communicates with electronic devices, which requires explaining technical concepts in simple terms. Firmware can be thought of as the permanent instructions for an electronic device, and it communicates with the device's central processing unit, CPU, using computer code over an electronic circuit. When the device powers up, the CPU sends a message to the firmware asking for its initial instructions, which then execute and begin the operation of the device.